John Mouse in the News by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Simpkin, who lives in Appletree Cottage, was sitting in his favourite armchair watching television. After a hard day's work, Mr. Simpkin enjoys watching evening's television. John Mouse, who also lives in Appletree Cottage, although Mr. Simpkin doesn't know it, wasn't at home. He was standing down the road at a bus stop. It was such a nice evening, and he decided to sneak off on an adventure. John Mouse enjoys a good adventure. Eventually, a bus came along and stopped to let somebody off. John Mouse nipped onto the bus without anybody seeing him. The nice thing about being of the size of John Mouse is that you don't have to pay when you go by bus. As long as you're not seen, that is. Ting ting went the bell, and the bus drove off into town. The bus arrived in town, and John Mouse nipped off the same way he'd nipped on, without anybody seeing him. There was lots of traffic and people around, and John Mouse had to be careful. The nasty thing about being the size of John Mouse is that if you're not careful, you can end up as a squashed mouse. So John Mouse was very careful. Now, the bus had stopped right outside a big important-looking building. John Mouse looked up. Above the door, in big important letters, it said, Television Centre.
That looks like an likely place for an adventure. Ha ha ha!
He thought to himself, and slipped past the doorbell and in through the big doors. Inside it was all hustle and bustle, and John Mouse found himself in a long corridor full of doors. Behind all the doors was where they made all the television programs. Eventually, right at the end of the corridor, John Mouse came to a door on which it said, The News.
I'd like to see how they do the news,
John Mouse thought to himself, and peeped round the corner of the door. There were cables and cameras and people everywhere, including the man who reads news, who John Mouse had seen on Mr. Simpkin's television.
I could have some fun here.
John Mouse thought as he looked around. As you know, or perhaps you don't, John Mouse is a mischievous mouse. Some mice are, some mice aren't. John Mouse is. Definitely. He grinned, a mischievous mouse grin. It was nearly time for the news. Right, everybody, nearly time, announced the important man, who was obviously in charge. Everybody quiet! He shouted, making more noise than anybody else. The cameraman got ready. The soundman got ready. The newsreader got ready. The reporter man got ready. Everybody got ready. And everybody, including a small figure who crept up to the desk that the newsreader sat behind to read the news. The cameraman started the camera. The newsreader cleared his throat. It was time for the news. Mr. Simpkin was still sitting at his home in his favourite armchair. Oh, good, he thought. Now it's time for the news. I wonder what's happening in the world today. And he settled back in his chair to watch. Good evening, said the newsreader in his best newsreading voice. The time is 9 o'clock, and here is the... He stopped with a puzzled expression on his face. Here is the... He said again, and stopped again. He tried once more right from the beginning. Good evening, he said. The time is 9 o'clock, and here is the... He started to giggle. And he started to laugh. He laughed, making himself red in the face. Mr. Simpkin at home couldn't believe his eyes. Now, you may have guessed what was happening. What was happening was that mischievous John Mouse was tickling the newsreader's leg with his paw and with his whiskers. The newsreader tried again. It is the... The important man was furious. Up in his soundproof control box, he reached for his telephone. Now, when the newsreader reads news, there are just 4 things on the desk in front of him. The news, typed in pieces of paper, a glass of water in case he feels thirsty, a hairbrush to use before the news so that he can look neat and tidy, and a telephone. Excuse me, said the newsreader to the camera, and picked up the telephone. Except it wasn't the telephone. because John Mouse, who by the time had jumped on the desk, had swished everything around. "Hello?" said the newsreader into the brush. Mrs. Simpkin, sitting at home, thought this was the funniest thing he ever seen. He laughed and laughed and laughed. The important man was furious. "Hello!" he boomed into his telephone. "Hello? Anybody there?" said the poor newsreader into the hairbrush. Newsreader suddenly realised that he can't answer a hairbrush. "Oh dear," he groaned to himself. "I must have a drink of water." And he reached out to pick up the glass of water for a drink. But John Mouse had switched things around again. The newsreader was trying to drink the telephone. He mentioned that. Mrs. Simpkin nearly fell off his chair laughing. Oh dear. Oh. You think that suddenly realised that you can't drink through a telephone. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, he groaned, rubbing his hands through his hair. And then realising what he'd done, he reached out to pick up the hairbrush. But John Mouse had switched things around again. The newsreader was trying to brush his hair through a glass of water. Imagine. The water poured all over him. And this time Mr. Simpkin did fall off his chair laughing. Guess who laughed first more? And then John Mouse thought he'd had enough mischief for one evening, so he sneaked off and sneaked onto a bus and sneaked back to Apple Tree Cottage. Mrs. Simpkin was still sitting on the floor in front of his television set, still laughing. John Mouse grinned one of those mischievous mouse grins that only he can grin. And he went to bed. And that is the end of the news.